In this section, we're going to be talking about how to form your letters. So first, we're going to talk about what are the basic elements of lettering. The first thing, you might remember back when you were learning cursive in school or handwriting in school, you had these 3 lines, the top solid line, the middle dotted line, and the bottom line. Well, these are called the cap height, the X height, and the base line. We're also adding in a 4th line that's called the descender. And you'll see that that is where any letter that goes below the baseline is going to go to this descender line. Okay, you can also add in a 5th line for your ascenders to go even higher than your cap height, but that's a personal preference. So I'll show you a few examples of how you can use these 4 things. First, for consistency in your lettering, and this is where I always use my ruler to keep my line straight and make sure I'm going in a straight line and that I'm consistent. So first, again, every time you go down, your downstroke is going to be light pressure. And anytime you go to the side or up, it's going to be light pressure. And I'm starting first with letters that are not cursive, just to give you an example of what we're talking about. In this video, I'm using my Pentel sign brush in blue. Other elements, as you're using the basic standard writing that's not cursive, you can add little serifs. Serifs are these lines that go across the top and bottom of your letters. And as you're looking at fonts online, you might see them use the terms serif and sans serif font. Sans serif means without serifs. So this one has serifs on them. So by knowing the basics, then you can change it up. So in this example, all the cap height, X height, baseline, and descender are equal distance apart. But you can change that up. So in this example, I've changed the X height and moved it down, and I've moved the descender up. And you'll see how it has a big impact for lots of different letters. And actually, when we move on to the cursive example, you'll see much bigger difference in how the changing of these things impacts it. But you can see it adds a lot of character moving this X height down. Now, in addition to changing the distance between these things, you can also change the angle with which your letters are going or the width of your letters. If you remember back to geometry and math, that you've got the X and Y axis. Well, so the X axis is this way and the Y axis is this way. So we're going to change now the Y axis with the width, and we're going to add angles. I find it really helpful when I'm doing angles to draw guidelines for myself and very lightly in pencil. Otherwise, I tend to struggle and change the angle. Now I'm going to change, so this one was also a little skinnier in width, and now I'm going to make it a little fatter in the width, but still with an angle. And when you're changing the angle, you're only changing these vertical lines. You're going to keep everything horizontal straight. So like if you're adding the serifs are going to continue to go straight along this line. I don't know if you can see it with the here we go. So you can see how different character you can add to your lettering. I also, in here, I'd like you to see that You can also add character by making your letters all lowercase or all uppercase. It's also a great way to add emphasis on different words. So again, in modern hand lettering, I think the beauty is in mixing the styles and mixing the uppercase and lowercase and mixing cursive and non-cursive writing. Now I'm going to show you an example of using cursive lettering with the same basic concepts. Again, we have our cap height, X height, baseline, and descender. So there it is using the Pentel sign brush. I'll also show you, I'll go back over it with the black dual brush Tombow just to give you a feel of how different the letters look using a thicker brush. And again, one of the reasons I love my Tombow dual brushes is that you can really get a nice thick line, but you got to be really careful when you're using them that you don't crowd your letters. Like you'll see that this N and G are a little too crowded. So if I had done it again, I would do it with this first, but you can see how beautiful and thick the line can get and then how thin it can get. So I'll go back to my Pentel sign brush. And if I were to make this a little larger on the page, it would work really well with the Tombow. Now here's where I really love mixing up where I'm putting the X height and the descender. Especially, for some reason, I love the letter F. Isn't that insane? But you can see how much character that your letters have when you change these distances. For the love of pretty things. And now we're going to do, again, with really narrow letters, it's going to be more difficult to use your dual brush marker unless you're doing a really large piece of art or you have a lot of room on your paper. But right here, I don't have a lot of room, so you'll see that this marker works really well. Now as we widen it, that's going to provide more room for your letters to spread out. So something else I want to point out when you're doing hand lettering. Here's two different ways I put together the T and the H. And that's one of the things I love is that you can add, they're basically forming them the same way, the same letters, but look at how different they look, how different their characters are. And you can really use your style of lettering to create emotion and tell a story. So that's something when I teach classes on how to form your letters, you want to think about what's the message you're trying to say. This looks very romantic and whimsical. So you're not going to necessarily put that if your message is one of anger or hate or injustice. So you want to sort of think about your lettering and how it's forming. I've also provided in the resources blanks for you to practice as much as you want. And I think that it's really important to get a feel for what you like. And I would take your basic hand lettering, your cursive, I should say your handwriting. Like when you write cursive, how do you normally write? Start with that and apply the techniques of the up light, down heavy. And then you can start to get fancy. You can add swirls and curve them in. I love sort of curving my letters like this. It adds so much character. And then you can give long swirls and tails. Or you can, or again, you can take your descender way down and make it much more angled. And again, once you learn these techniques, you can really change it up. Learn the basic rules, play with it, and once you've mastered something, I like to throw the rules out the window. One thing we talk about that's very popular in hand lettering is bounce lettering. And what you're doing with bounce lettering is you're taking this bottom descender line and you're bouncing it. And you generally want it to end up in the same place. But you can see I'm going to go high here, and then I'm going to go low for the E, and then I'm going to go back up for the L, and then maybe I might go low again for the other L. But you can see that you want them to sort of balance out to be similar. So they've gone up and down, but generally it's keeping an average of your baseline. So you want to be really careful when you're bouncing them to not bounce them too much or not have them too even. So let me show you again. Let's use the same example, but I'm going to sort of mess up how I bounce. I'm not going to alternate as much. So we'll go hello, and then we'll go up here. And you can see that it doesn't balance as well, and it's harder to read. It sort of looks more emphasis on the hell than hello. So you can see how you might, as you're learning, you might want to play with how you're bouncing the letters and get a rhythm for how you move them. Now's a great time to print out your practice sheets. And here's what I love about practice sheets. You don't need to think about where you're going with the letters. You just start tracing. And anywhere it's thin, you go thin. And this is a great way to build muscle memory. I even like to put my practice sheets on my iPad Pro, and then that way I can practice and erase it and just start again. And you can print off as many as you want. And don't worry about making mistakes. A lot of these practice sheets, it's just about building the muscle memory. So if it's not perfect, or one line is maybe a little too thick, or another line is a little shaky, don't worry about it. Just keep going and keep building that muscle memory. Keep practicing. I love doing this when I'm sitting in front of the TV at night. I grab my practice sheets or some scrap paper, and as I'm watching TV, maybe somebody will say a word, and I'll practice writing that word. Or I'll practice adding some serifs or taking away some serifs or doing more undercase or more uppercase. So you'll see, that's how you use your practice lettering sheets. And it really is that simple. You just keep practicing and practicing until you've built the muscle memory and your strokes are smoother. Now, one thing that's also important as you're doing lettering is you have these beautiful letters, but there's so much you can do with it. One basic way to add character is just to outline your words. So I like to take a different color, and this is where my fine tip on the dual brush marker comes in such handy. And pick a direction one side and outline it. And again, you can sort of practice giving, like here, I took it further away, or you could take it right next to it. But you want to pick one side to shadow. And with shadowing, you want to think about a light being in the room and shining to one side. So right now I'm pretending like the light is shining from this side and casting a shadow to the other side. And you can also, I'm going to come over here, you can also, I'll go the other way now. This is the direction I normally go. And look how fun, and it pops the letters. The other thing you can do is you can add a second shadow. Or you can add highlights in certain areas. Like maybe you don't highlight everything, but you only highlight the edges. So you add a second shadow just in certain parts. This is a great way to add color and personality and pop to your letters. Also with outlining or shadowing, this is shadowing. Outlining is if you would do the entire letter. Here I'm outlining it for you. There's outline. Now if you're going to shadow, the other thing you can do is fill in the shadow. And I like to do it with like little stripes, and they'll give it a 3D look. If you can see that. So you can just do one line, you can do one line with an accent, you can outline it completely, you could do 2 full lines, or you can do one line and fill it in to make it look 3-dimensional. So those are all ways to add character to your letters. Another great way to add character to your drawings is to add accents. These are all of my favorite ways to accent or add design elements to your drawings. And these are all my favorites, and you'll find this in the resources. And again, when you print this off, you can print it and just sit and practice. And don't worry about getting the tracing exactly right. Again, you're sort of practicing different elements. And you can use, and this is where it's fun to play with different colors. And I used the fine tip on these, but you can also use the dual brush side to, again, add a little interest and flair. But it's really up to you, and it's lots of fun. And I've sort of mixed things up a little bit here. I like to use this design element a lot around my letters. So again, some of these you would use on their own, some of them you'd use in conjunction to accent your letters or your design. But these are all really fun ways to add personality and charm to whatever you're writing or lettering. And I want to remind you that with hand lettering, things don't have to be perfect. You know, it's supposed to look hand lettered. It's not supposed to look like a computer font. So don't be afraid to play with it. Don't be afraid to make it your own or make it different. You'll notice here that I'm using my fine tip to go back and add the downstroke to make it thicker. So that's what we like to call cheater modern hand lettering. So don't worry about if you don't have the special markers to make the thick downstrokes. You can fake it. I also recommend, if you don't have Tombow brush markers, which are awesome and totally worth the investment, get just a regular Sharpie or your kids' Crayola markers and just start practicing going and doing your letters. I'm going to show you this. So you have your word, and then you can go back and add the downstroke. Okay, so you don't have to wait to get started practicing. You can literally do it anywhere with just a piece of paper and a pencil. All right, we're gonna keep going. And again, here's what I love about hand lettering is it can be whatever you make it, and it can be your style. What's my style might not be your style, and that's okay. It's art. Not everyone has to like it. Not everyone has to do it your way. You can make this yours, and don't be embarrassed if it's not perfect. Just keep practicing, because none of us are perfect. None of us are going to do an awesome job every time. It takes practice. I love arrows. And there's just a million ways that you can add little accents or the feathers or whatever. There's a million ways to make arrows. So I always love doing arrows. Another important design element of hand lettering is banners. I guess are banners. And there's so many different ways that you can add accents to your words with banners. And you can really bring the focus of the eye to different words based on what design element you're adding. So I love banners, and once you learn how to make banners, you can really play with them and do so much with them. And these are a nice way to sort of add to the sides of words, but they can also be like little mountains that you can add if you're, go climb a mountain, whatever you're writing. And these can go to the sides of words or under words. There's so many different ways to accent what you're saying. And of course you can add little bunting to things. We'll do another. These always remind me of like the old school Batman pow bang. That always cracks me up. And so here you go. Here are lots of different examples of how you can add different design elements to your hand lettering. And finally, a great way to add a decorative element to your hand lettering is swashes and swirls. And you can connect these to your letters, or you can do them around your letters or underneath. But this swash worksheet is a great way to practice and give you an idea of how you can move your pen in different ways to create sort of a romantic feel, or create movement in the page and draw the eye to other places. So here I'm using just the fine tip. You'll see I don't often go exact. I don't worry about making sure I'm right on the line. When I'm doing a practice sheet, I really just want to have the general movement. It gives me an idea of where I'm going. Now you can see I use the fine tip so it's constant on this, but you can also use the brush tip to have varying thicknesses. And I really just love playing with this, that there's no right or wrong. And you can see how swash sheets can be so much fun to practice and give you an idea of how to move your marker. So in this section, we've given you lots of examples of how to form your letters using cap height, X height, baseline, descender. And we've talked about how to practice your thick downstroke, light upstroke. And we've given you lots of different decorative elements to design your work. Once you master these things, you can move on to use them in all sorts of decor in your home.